Welcome YouTube, it's Chobra, and today I want to talk briefly about something that came up in the last week of VCT Pacific and also VCT Americas. And primarily I'm talking about these select few matches. Now if we take a look at the very last day of VCT Pacific and Americas, we had a couple interesting matches, and those are going to be RRQ versus Team Secret, which I guess if you haven't watched it yet, yeah, it might have been a little bit of a shocker. DFM versus Boom Esports, and of course, Evil Geniuses versus Loud. Now, what do all of these have in common? Well, they didn't actually change anything for the playoffs, which are coming up in the next couple weeks. And of course, the playoffs matter because then you can go to Masters Toronto and you can get a Masters trophy and potentially even more championship points towards the end of the year. Now, let's take a look at this short little clip.
So then, did you watch the Pacific games this morning?
You
You need an intervention! We need to hold a goddamn intervention because those Pacific games didn't even matter. They didn't do anything. They
They're
didn't
great
change a
games.
thing.
I want to preface this by saying that I know that deep inside, Sideshow doesn't actually believe in every single thing he said, right? He's talking strictly about it doesn't matter for playoffs. It doesn't change anything for the next week. It doesn't change anything about my emotions about the team, which I would kind of disagree with, but I'll give him that benefit of the doubt, right? Okay, it's not really changing anything about, either of these teams. One of them's eliminated anyway, so I don't really care about them until, later on, etc., etc. Vision and ideology aside of how we should build narratives and really cater to a bigger entertainment audience and all of that, even just factually, these matches have a pretty high probability of mattering by the end of the year. And that's what I want to talk about. So let's go back to last year. Remember last year, you know how we had a very similar system? It was a little bit rougher, but by the end of stage 2, you had 3 teams that were moving on to champions. And then the last 4th place team, the 4th seed team of every region going to champions, was determined by the championship points system. Now let's take a look at what happened, shall we? So, taking a look at the standings. Now, these are standings based on championship points. Obviously, by the end of the actual playoffs, Gen G actually won Stage 2, so they went in as the first seed. But it's DRX, Gen G, Paper X, they were the top 3 in Stage 2. And then Talon goes to champions. They had a total of 7 points. Team Secret had a total of 7 points, but Talon makes it in. And then right behind that, might I add, T1 and RQ had 6 points each. Let's look at Americas. All right, G2 Crew Lev, obviously not in that order. 3 of them, top 3 of Americas, they go to champions. The 4th place seed was determined by Sentinels, who had 12 total points. 100 Thieves also had 12 total points. Another tie, and in case you don't remember, these were determined by, I believe, year-long head-to-head, right? So I believe Talent Team Secret was something like a 3-1 head-to-head scoreline. They had actually played each other a ton. Sentinels 100 Thieves, I think, might have been a 2-1, something like that, in favor of Sentinels, so they actually get the seed. Then we look at China. EDG, FPX, Trace, these are your top 3 going out of Stage 2 or, qualifying through Stage 2 finals, so they go in as the top 3 seeds. And the 4th seed is Billy Gaming, who has 6 points and is tied with DRG, Dragon Ranger Gaming, with 6 points. And right behind, there's JDG with 5, All Gamers with 5, so still only another 1 point difference. And even here, it is indeed BLG had a 1-0 head-to-head, I believe, over DRG, so BLG took the seed. EMEA was a little bit different because Foot took the seed with the points. They had 11, and they were far ahead, so it didn't really matter there. Fine. But already, we had 3 out of the 4 regions actually have a tiebreaker scenario with championship points. Now, the point system doesn't work exactly the same anymore this year, and obviously, overall, the system has been changed. Now, there are 2 seeds with championship points, so that gives a little bit more leeway and things like that. But my point is even last year, it was actually pretty incredibly close. And we're arguing, especially for a region like Pacific this year, that it's much closer. It's much tighter. You have no idea who's going to win. So how in the world are we saying that these matches don't matter? Now, there's 2 ways you can argue this. Do they matter for Secret? No, they really don't, because let's take a look at where the standings are. If you look at the standings so far for 2025, this is the VCT 2025 standings so far by the end of, or, currently in Stage 1. The total points that we have, T1 very far ahead because, they got the extra 5 from winning Bangkok as well. So they're at 10 points. DRX at 7. Okay, pretty good. And then you've got 5, 4, 4, 3, 3, 2, 2. All right. pretty close. Obviously, pretty big gap, even from 5 to 2 as well. And then GE, Team Secret, and DFM are sitting with 1 or 0 points. So for Team Secret, it doesn't really matter because you're no longer in playoffs, so you can't go to Masters Bangkok. And so now your literal only chance is to guarantee it, is to obviously win stage 2 or get to the grand finals, right? Because otherwise, there's a weird chance that you might have to have more points than T1, which would be, I believe, just impossible. But aside from that, let's just say T1 and DRX make it through. Let's assume that Boom, and Gen G Talent, they don't get any extra points, right? So even that 1 point could actually matter because it's like, okay, well, maybe if I get third, I actually beat them in points total, because what if they don't do that well in stage 2? Now, that's a very, very, very outlier scenario. I get that, but it could matter, right? It could. Now, I'm not saying we should make it sound like that's the biggest deal ever. Like, oh my gosh, like this one match, they need to remember this like 3 months down the road. This is what's going to make the difference. I'm not saying we should build a narrative like that. But my point is saying it just straight up doesn't matter is a little weird. And also, I'm actually with Sliggy on this one. I was watching this game and I'm literally thinking, okay, Secret winning like this well? I mean, I almost wonder if you want that or not, because now you're like, okay, let's say I was planning on making roster changes. Now I watch that and I'm like, okay, well, actually the direction doesn't look all that bad. Maybe I do need to give it another shot. But let alone that's the outlier. Let's talk about RQ. You've got 3 points, right? But you didn't go to Masters Bangkok. You did not get 1st through 4th at kickoff. So actually, if in the weird case that you can't make it to Masters Toronto, right, and get the extra 5, 3, 2, 1 points, and even let's say you get 4th, right, so you don't go to Masters Toronto, you're getting 1 extra point in the playoffs, so you'd have max 4. Every point's gonna matter because there's a very big likelihood that you're tied with one or more of these teams that are all crowded around, the 4 to 2 points here, or 5 to 3 points. And also us knowing what it means for teams to go to champions, not just for the rep, but for the orgs as well. You've got the champions bundles, you get more awareness, so maybe you sell more of your team bundles and all of that. It's a pretty big deal. So I agree. Did I expect this to be the best showing ever from RQ? No, it shouldn't be, right? You shouldn't have to do that. But also, as a narrative, if you can't beat Secret without bringing out all your cards, a team that has 0 wins so far in the regular season, that also matters, right? Because yes, Secret might have improved, but that's also like, I mean, listen, aren't you supposed to be the best team in this group? And just because you didn't bring out the newest, hottest strategies and the newest, hottest compositions, you can't beat them 2-1? Like, that's another story point that you can also kind of hone in on and be like, okay, well, we'll have to see, because now they have to really convince us in playoffs. Like, there's so many other ways to make this meaningful, and also literally it can mean something because we've seen these tiebreakers happen before. Like, I'm losing my mind here because it sounds like people just forgot that this mattered for 3 regions out of 4 last year. I mean, let's look at Americas, right? You're talking about EG versus Loud. Loud didn't technically matter right now, and the only way it matters is a very, very big outlier. Fine. So you don't want to hype that up. You shouldn't hype that up. I agree. That's not good storytelling. That's overhyping. But for EG to say it doesn't matter, I think it's disingenuous, right? You're not expecting them to pull out all the stops, but okay, you're thinking, I mean, this might come back to haunt them, right? Because they're right in the middle of the pack with 3 points. We're not talking about some freak chance outlier here. There's a real possibility that these matches mattered. I mean, even for Boom. Yeah, that's great that they're 5-0, but T1 and DRX are so far ahead. And so unless they get top 2, you're kind of looking at the points, right? And so if you don't get top 2, let's say T1 and DRX continue to still just do well, maybe they still make it to Toronto, et cetera, et cetera. Now it's like, okay, you really need to make sure that you had more points, but let's say you don't go undefeated in stage 2. Who knows what happens then? You're not that far ahead. The only teams I think this, like, you can really kind of comfortably say, even if you didn't run the numbers, is like T1 and G2, because they're so far ahead. You're like, okay, I mean, that really has to be an outlier where it would matter. Fine, I get that. But forget the argument that Shio was making on Platchat, which I think is also valid, because how else are you going to grow a sport and an entertainment industry without actually having a reason to follow other than simple win-loss records on a piece of paper? Because then why are we watching the matches? We might as well just look at the results on Liquipedia and VLR, right? So while I totally agree with Shio there, but even before that argument comes to place, I think there is a middle ground you can find between it doesn't matter and it totally matters. Like, you can build a good narrative and a story and plant a good seed for it to come to fruition, there's that gray area is very big. And I think for these teams, for these matches, it mattered a lot. I'm telling you, we saw this in 3 out of 4 regions. Tiebreakers happen. And for 2 out of those regions, if that wasn't a tiebreaker, you actually just barely scraped by with 1 point. This matters. It does matter. I don't know how else I have to prove this. I'm not saying you have to talk it up to be the greatest match ever, or I'm not saying you have to doom and gloom about the team not winning, and getting the championship point. But to totally start off by saying, well, this doesn't matter, I think that's really disingenuous and I think that's actually kind of disrespectful, because it can matter. And quite frankly, I think especially from the players and teams perspective, even if you're not doing all the math, obviously you want to win every match. So now you're just making all of it not matter, which I think is a little bit not great. So anyway, my point is that there's a middle ground that you can carefully, artfully craft, and you're not actually making things up, because it does matter. It literally mattered less than a year ago. I'm losing my mind recording this video because I don't know how else to prove it to everybody. So for anyone else watching, just know that, it wasn't the most important match of the stage. No, but could it have impact? Could this be the start of a butterfly effect? Sure. And it's not even that crazy of a butterfly effect. I do think it is going to matter a bit, especially because in the case of Pacific, these teams that are currently at the top of their groups were not the teams we expected. They were not the teams that were at the top at kickoff. They were not the teams that were at the top last year, right? It's RQ and Boom. So it's still a small sample size for them. If they can continue the streak, great. But if they can't, now the points actually do come into play. Just keep that in mind. Even in playoffs, you're looking at power levels, etc. The expectations going to stage 2. I think this buildup will continue to snowball. So I think it's worth keeping an eye on. I hope more people kind of care about that long term, because that's also just how you discover if you want to follow a team long term or not. That's how you have a fandom of a team, a player, a league, things like that. And honestly, the more interest we can all have, the more invested interest we can have, then we can craft amongst ourselves, the healthier the league is going to get. So just wanted to put that out there. Listen, I love I love all of my colleagues. And I know that deep down, they know the math and all of that. I don't think they're being necessarily disingenuous, but I do think that there needs to be some counter narrative here. And that's all I wanted to talk about. And of course, when it comes to Pacific, playoffs, I don't even know if I want to do my pick'ems today on stream, because I have no idea. I have no idea how it's going to pan out. So that makes things even more interesting. Anyway, that's going to be it for this one. In case you are wondering, actually, by the way, the RRQ secret game, this game, was actually quite an interesting match. It was very, very refreshing from Team Secret. Now, whether that makes it better or worse for you, that's up to you to decide. But I think this was definitely a match worth watching. So if you missed it, maybe go check out the VODs. But of course, the playoffs will continue this weekend, and we'll be live for watch parties both here on YouTube and on Twitch. So if you want to join us and have some fun, drop by during the live streams. And if not, if you enjoyed the video, definitely consider subscribing to the channel and leave a like on the video and a comment down below, because that helps the algorithm as well. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.